Welcome to Maintaining a Balance video 13. In this video, we're going to be focusing on the structure of the nephron, which we briefly covered in our lesson regarding video 12 and our dissection of the kidney. But today we're going to take a closer look at its structure and how the different processes that occur within the nephron help to form the urine and regulate both our water and waste composition within our body system. So here we have a picture of the nephron structure. As mentioned in class, we see that the glomerulus forms that big bundle coming from our renal artery, and that lies within the Bowman's capsule. Now that's sometimes referred to as like a softball glove, which is the Bowman's capsule, and then we've got the ball, which is the glomerulus. Then we move on to the proximal tubule, and proximal means close, and it's convoluted, so it's all wound up. And then we get to our first, our loop of Henle, which is, you can see, is this big loop down here. We go to our distal convoluted tubule, so that means further away, and then we go here to our collecting duct, and this goes into our ureter, which travels to our bladder, which holds our waste and our urine before we can expel that from our body. So the structure of the nephron is really important to produce our filtrate, which forms our urine, which we expel from our body. So from our glomerulus into our Bowman's capsule, along the way, there are many substances moving in, moving out. Some are active, some are passive. And you can see here that we notice the change in our concentration of our solutes here. And we can also see the arrows of the picture representing the way the substances are moving out. So these blue arrows are where substances are moving out. And if they're moving of our out of the nephron, it means it's being reabsorbed by our body. So we can see here that there are lots of parts of the nephron where water is being reabsorbed, and that's really important to ensure that we're staying hydrated and our osmotic balance is staying within the range that we require for our enzymes to function. There are three processes that occur in the nephron which allow us to form our urine. And we can see that the first one is filtration, second we have reabsorption, and third we have secretion. So we can see that the first step in the filtration occurs within the glomerulus, and that's where all those capillaries are bundled up inside that Bowman's capsule. Because they're there in such a large concentration, the wastes are being pushed out by high pressure, and the waste that we don't require in our blood is moving into our Bowman's capsule, which we term our glomerular filtrate. Second, we move on to the reabsorption step, and that's where we want to reabsorb some of the solutes that our body needs, mainly to maintain our osmotic balance. And that we know that solutes are reabsorbed by our body through active transport. And then we've also looked at the fact that when substances are reabsorbed via active transport, that we see a passive transport and a passive follow through of water by osmosis. And then we have some secretion where we are secreting some of the solutes in our body into the filtrate for us to remove from our body. So some things that don't necessarily want to leave our body, but they're in too high of a concentration for our body to function optimally. So here we have what I discussed in the picture in words. So this is first filtration. So where we form our filtrate, we have water, our nitrogenous waste, any food materials, And this is just the first step. So we know that it's all filtered out of our body, and then our body decides what do we need to reabsorb and then what do we need to remove from our body. Remember, filtration is non-selective and it's passive, so it doesn't require any energy. If we move to reabsorption, it's where our body reabsorbs any materials that it can reuse. And that's where we're starting to reabsorb any glucose, amino acids, vitamins, and sometimes water. Our solute reabsorption, so when we're reabsorbing the glucose and amino acids, depends on what our body's telling us, so the feedback mechanisms that it's giving us, and thereby active transport or facilitated diffusion, so they're using energy. If we want to reabsorb some water, it's usually following in by osmosis. And some of the hormones in our body can change the membrane's permeability. So remember, osmosis occurs through a semi-permeable membrane. So when we want more water to be absorbed, we have hormones in our body that make sure we have more permeable holes, so more holes in our nephron, and they're called aquaporins, where water can travel through. And the reabsorption is occurring in the proximal and distal convoluted tubules and the loop of Henle. Here we have a diagram which summarizes that, so we can see that they're actively moving out, and we can see it happens in both of those places where we just mentioned. Then our third one, secretion. So it's selective, active transport. This is where we're removing any toxic substances and also any drugs and other substances that we want to get out of our body. Usually occurs by diffusion. And that diffusion happens with urea and ammonia, but sometimes other secretions involve active transport, which is using energy. So here we have a diagram which summarizes all of the substances that move both in and out of our body, and we can see that the arrows here represent active and passive transport. It's probably recommended that you summarize this image into some text so you can understand what the process that is exactly happening along here. But we can see that our body does actually absorb lots of the stuff that filters through there. We're just making sure that any of our waste products are removed and don't actually stay within our body. The final part of this video is a quick and a brief overview of renal dialysis before you undertake your secondary research task. And renal dialysis is an artificial process that removes waste from our body, and it happens because a person will have an impaired kidney function. And we know that if kidneys don't function correctly, there's a buildup of waste products in our body, which can be toxic. So some patients will undergo this treatment to ensure that they can remove that waste from their body. So here we see the patient is hooked up to a machine called a dialyzer, and blood from the patient's body travels to the dialyzer, which has a semi-permeable, which a partially permeable membrane, similar to the permeability we see in our nephron, and allows waste to pass out of our body, but it makes sure that none of our blood cells or proteins, just like it would in the nephron, leave our body. For this process to occur, heparin, which is a chemical, has to be added to the blood to prevent any clotting as the blood travels through the machine. The blood that is cleaned then returns to the body. Now, a patient has to undergo this treatment 2 to 3 times per week for 3 to 4 hours at a time. So you can see that there are quite a few disadvantages to not only suffering from impaired kidney function, but I guess the change in lifestyle that you'll have to have because of your impaired kidney function. So that's video 13. Make sure that you familiarize yourself with this process because I've given you a brief overview, but make sure that you consult the textbooks, which you can find on Google Classroom or in the classroom, to make sure that you have all the notes required to completely understand this process. Make sure you tune in for video 14.